Good morning. Good morning. We're going to get started. Thank you for waiting patiently. And we're going to open up. This is our regular staff meeting of January the 13th, 2026. Can you believe it? So we're going to get started. On the top of our agenda is introduction of the deputies at the Todd B. Portune Center for County Government. And Charmaine McGuffey is not able to be here, but we have Lieutenant Gary Wolfzorn is going to introduce them. Come forward. Thank you.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank the Board of County Commissioners. I'd like to thank the Sheriff's Office and the staff for letting me speak. But most of all, I want to introduce two fantastic young, not so young, but gentlemen that have some big shoes to fill. As we all know, we were here the last month, and Jimmy Rain and Gary Houston retired. And I'd like to introduce the two that we were going to be putting over this building, and they have a long-standing, great record, and I think you guys will be very, very happy with them. First, I would like to introduce Bob Seaton. Bob Seaton started with the, come on up here, Bob. Bob started with the Sheriff's Office in 2005. He came to court service in January 2014. He's a member of our QRT, which is our quick response team, that if anything goes on in the county, he's one of many of the team members we send to the situations. Bob previously worked in on the probate unit and probate court for a while. He's very, very good at versing with many different people and dealing with those situations. Bob has been around for a while, and he's very, very good at what he does. He's very good with people. Other guy is Deputy Casey Enderly. He started with the Sheriff's Office in 2015. He came to court services in October of 2020. He's probably one of the most calm and level-headed deputies that we have. He very, very, very laid back and very also good, very good with people. Both of these deputies have numerous combinations with the judges from the courthouse in different areas, and I think you're going to be very, very pleased with what they have to offer you. And if not, you can call me. We'll take care of it. Bob, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes.
I'm Deputy Robert Seaton. I've been with the county for almost 21 years now. I've been in law enforcement for almost 30. I started my career in Arizona, and then Wisconsin, then here. I do have a lot of experience. I asked to come over here because I know Jimmy and I know Gary pretty well. They had a great post. They did a lot of good work. It wasn't always obvious the things that needed to happen here at the building, but spending time with them was a real education. So I look forward to learning everybody's names. Please, as I've told many of you before, be patient. They had 10 years to get that right. I'm not going to remember everybody's name, but believe me that we're both trying really hard to do so. Thank you for letting us come over, and thanks for letting us be here.
Thank you. We're not done with you yet, but
Hi, Deputy Case Enderly. I've been with the county for a little over 10 years now. I don't have near the experience as he does, but I've been in the courthouse for a little over 5. So these big shoes to fill, Gary and Jimmy gone. I'm not so great with names, faces. I get you. Names, I'm working on them. So, like he said, just bear with us. We'll get it down.
thank you, sir. Thank you both.
Gary and Jimmy on speed dial on our phones.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
And my chief of staff was saying it would be great to get to know these guys and have you come up and get to know us. So just stay there for a minute. We're going to have our commissioners say a few words. Vice President Reese, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say, welcome. It is big shoes. We gave you a little bit of a cheat sheet. So when I got here, I said, well, it's only in terms of the elected offices, there's only 6 of us. And if we put our picture behind you, you can turn around like a cheat sheet. You'll kind of know, at least you'll know 6 coming in the building. But yeah, you have a very important job. You're the front door of obviously the county, but also keeping it safe and as well as, welcoming. So I appreciate that. I did have one question though. Are we going to continue to have the bike? There was a deputy on the bicycle that came around.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So what I have them doing is they're going around the county campus. I make sure that they stop at the buildings here and they do rounds on the floor. So yes, we definitely will be continuing with that. That has been fantastic for the county campus.
Yeah. Just want to thank you all and the sheriff for that, and it's part of your team as well. So yeah, we're excited about it. You'll see a lot of us. We're part of the family now. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming up. Welcome to the county. We are excited to have you. Gary and Jimmy were friends to all of us. They greeted us every day when we came in. We had great relationships. So we expect we'll have the same with you. It'll happen over a period of time probably, but we're really excited to have you on board. And from my perspective, you're keeping all of us safe and on the high road, but you're also serving the citizens of this county when they come in. I can't tell you how many times I saw Gary and Jimmy directing people, where do they get their vehicle tags? Where is JFS? Where is this? Because it's confusing for people when they come down here. And they really don't know where to go. And so the level of welcome and patience that they exhibited towards our constituents and your constituents was really exemplary. And that's what made them so special, was that they really loved the people that they were serving and welcoming into the county campus. So we're really excited to have you on board, and thanks for coming up and saying hello.
Thank you. Just a few words. You guys messed up right away as soon as you started. And the way you messed up is because Gary and Jimmy look just alike. One was black, one was white, but they look just alike. So maybe you'll lose some hair and look like him. I don't know.
It happens over time, man.
It happens okay. And we talk about big shoes to fill. I don't know why I think Gary and Jimmy had smaller shoes. But they are big shoes to fill. And so your biggest issue, I think, may be our parking and helping us get, and you guys have already experienced that. So thank you so much. And I'm thinking that these 3 issues that we have coming up today, we may need your protection because there's some serious issues. So, but thank you all, appreciate it. And whatever we can do for both of you, that would be great. So thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll move right along. Our next item on our agenda is the property tax update. Anson Turley.
I can absolutely guarantee this will not be as uplifting as that just was. All right, my name is Anson Turley. I'm the county's Deputy Assistant Administrator, and I have a presentation, and hopefully this will work. So today we're going to talk about the property changes and the reform that's taken place at the state. We're going to talk about some bills that have been signed into law. We'll discuss how it affects the county and also how it affects our residents. And as I go forward with this discussion, I want to make the point that none of these laws is going to cut property taxes or change the property tax bills that have already been issued. The purpose of these laws is to prevent the spikes that residents saw in their property taxes with their 2024 bill. So that being said, it's actually a group of legislation that on December 19th that Governor DeWine signed into law. We're going to discuss the 4 bills, and they were each designed to take care of one part of the property tax system to, again, accomplish that goal of keeping property tax bills from spiking. We're going to talk about House Bill 335, 186, 309, and 129. And 335 deals with the growth of inside millage. We'll discuss, basically what inside millage is. 186 talks about school revenue. House Bill 309 gives the CBC, the County Budget Commission, authority to implement those laws. And then we'll talk about House Bill 29, which deals with fixed sums levies. So when we go to House Bill 335, it limits the growth of inside millage, and how it limits that growth is it caps it to inflation rather than property value. Now, inside millage is the property tax that local governments are allowed to charge without voter approval. According to the ORC, it's 10 mills or 1%. So these local governments, they can charge it. They use it, of course, to fund their operations. The county charges inside millage, school districts, cities, villages. But this grew before HB 335. It would grow in proportion to your property tax value. So in 2023, when they did the reassessment or the reappraisal, property values skyrocketed. And as a result, since that inside millage growth was not capped, also property tax bills skyrocketed. Now that was good for the county. It was good for local governments because they could collect more money. However, if you were like me, a resident, and I'm sure everyone here, who lives in Hamilton County or owns property in Hamilton County, when they opened up their tax bill, they were shocked, right? So what HB 335 does is, instead of allowing the growth to grow unlimited according to property tax value, it will grow according to inflation. It ties allowable growth to, it's called a GDP inflator, but what that is that's a measure of the inflation in the economy as a whole. Some of us here have heard of the Consumer Price Index. That's a small basket of goods and how they inflate, but this actually ties it to the inflation of the economy as a whole. What that would do, and I'll show you in the next chart, and I want to thank John Brugan and Enrique Martin for this chart, how that would affect the county is here. So if you look at the chart, and starting in 2018, you've got two lines. You've got an orange line and you've got a blue line. The orange line is a hypothetical line of what our tax revenue, property tax revenue would have been for the county had we been under HB 335 at the time. The blue line is the actual tax revenue that we collected because we could collect it as property values increased. Now remember, historically, property values increase more than inflation. That doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does. And when COVID hit, we saw a big spike. So as we go down the years, in 2018, we would have collected approximately $1 million less in tax revenue. In 2019, $1 million, it continues to 2020. We know what happened in 2020, COVID. When COVID hit, everyone wanted to get a house. We had historically low interest rates, and because of the 2008 housing crisis, there weren't enough houses on the market. So property values started to rise. So in 2021, in 2022, and 2023, we would have collected approximately almost $5 million less each year in revenue for those years because property taxes were rising, but inflation wasn't rising as quickly. Then we hit to the 2023 appraisal. So 2023, they did the appraisal. 2024, it hits the tax bills, and look at the jump. So we would have collected $12.6 million less in 2024 and $12.6 million less in 2025. What does that mean cumulatively? That means that between 2018 and 2025, if House Bill 35 or House Bill 335 were in effect, we would have collected $42.6 million less in revenue. So I want to say that again, $42.6 million less in revenue. Now this is hypothetical, and again, Enrique and John, created this wonderful spreadsheet that just bared this all out, which was great. So going forward, what we want to, we can't assume it, right? Because it's based on the economy. We don't know how housing prices, what they're going to do in the future. We don't know what inflation's going to do in the future. But if the trends follow, we'll probably collect less in property tax revenue than we have in the past. That being said, let's go to House Bill 186. So the same way that House Bill 335 capped or tied inside millage to inflation and not property tax value, House Bill 186 does the same things for school districts who are sitting on the 20 mil floor. Now, I'm going to try to explain the 20 mil floor in one sentence that's understandable, so bear with me here. So the 20 mil floor is every school district is allowed to collect a minimum of 20 mils of taxes for their operating expenses. And once they hit that floor, those taxes, that millage cannot be reduced. So, and the reason this is significant is because in the state of Ohio, I don't have the data for Hamilton County, but in 2024 in the state of Ohio, approximately 78% of the school districts sat on the 20 mil floor, and it's to their advantage. The reason it is to their advantage is because when property taxes rise, they get that windfall of revenue. Well, again, once they get that windfall, it's got to come from someplace, and it comes from where? It comes from our residents, the ones who own the property. So that's, again, why we saw the bills, property tax bills for the residents go so high. And also keep in mind that the taxes that go to school districts are generally the greatest percentage of your tax bill. So if you look at the county tax bill, if you go to your auditor's website, if you look at what the county gets, it's nothing compared to what the school districts get. So this would account for the majority of the rise in the tax bill. What House Bill 186 does is it caps that operating growth, or those levies, or the tax revenue growth, to inflation, the same way that House Bill 335 does. Now, I don't have a fancy chart for that because I don't have the data, but you can imagine a similar reduction in the revenue that school districts will get over time, especially when property tax values increase. Now, on top of capping a revenue growth for those districts that sit on the 20 mil floor to inflation and not property values, it increases the owner-occupied tax credit from 2.5%, where it currently sits, to 15.38% by 2029. And it also phases out this 10% non-business rollback on residential rental property. So residential property, I believe up to 3 family dwellings, whether they are owned by owner-occupied or owned by corporations, they would get a 10% rollback. Over the years, until we get to 2029, that rollback will go to 0. And then that will be added to the owner-occupied tax credit so that those who live and occupy in their homes will actually get more of a credit than they do now. So that will also help homeowners. Our next bill is House Bill 309, and this just deals with the County Budget Commission authority. It helps the County Budget Commission, which is generally made up of, according to state law, the auditor, the treasurer, and the prosecutor. It helps them implement and enforce HB 335, among other things. So remember, we said that if property values spike, property values cannot go any higher than inflation. Well, in order to accomplish that, the millage has to be reduced. The County Budget Commission, it explicitly gives them authority to reduce that millage so that our residents won't see a spike in their property taxes. And it deals with some, they can adjust levies if they think that they're collecting too much money, which is maybe, a controversial thing. I've been talking with Government Strategies Group. They are the state lobbyists for the county. And I think of all the bills that are enacted, this is the one that we're least concerned with because it seems that we're all on the same page, that the government entities, our taxing districts, they need money in order to do their mission. And so this is probably one that would have the least effect on the county. And then the final bill that I'm going to talk about today is House Bill 129. And this prevents, again, a spike in taxes. And I'm going to have to refer to my notes on this one because this one was a little bit complex. So it changes how some future school property taxes are written by allowing voters to approve a specific dollar amount instead of a tax rate that automatically grows when property values rise. If you look on your tax bill like I did yesterday, it'll say that a school tax levy is written in millage. Now, I didn't know what a mill was until I started working for the county 3 years ago. A mill is $1 per thousand of property tax or property value. It allows them to write their levies where they can collect a fixed sum of money rather than a millage. So let's say that a school district puts forth a levy that's 2.8 mils. Well, again, as the property rises, your property values rise, it collects more money because since the property is worth more, those 2.8 mils are worth more. Well, now, if the levy is written for, say, to collect $12 million, What will happen is as property values rise, the millage will be decreased so that it only collects $12 million, and it allows them to put that even on the ballot so that I'm a voter, I'm a resident, how much money is this tax levy going to collect? Well, $12 million. I understand that. 2.8 mils, not so much. But, alternatively, if your property value goes down, the millage goes up because the fixed sum levy is going to collect $12 million either way. But it keeps the spike in property taxes from happening the way that we experienced them in 2024. So what are the key takeaways? These reforms don't cut property taxes. They are designed to prevent spikes in property tax bills, no matter how high the value of a property rises. School taxes make up the largest share of most property tax bills, which is why these bills address how much school tax revenue can be collected and capping it to the level of inflation. And one thing that I don't know the economy, no one really knows how the economy is going to go, but we are most likely going to be operating in a slower inflation-based revenue environment, which means we're going to have to take that into consideration as we do our budgeting and things moving forward. And my last slide is kind of, I'd say, one of the most depressing ones on this list. And this is the thing that's kind of hovering over all of this. There's a group called Citizens for Property Tax Reform, an organization that's proposing an amendment to the Constitution, and that would abolish property taxes and prohibit future ones from being imposed. Now, we don't know, they have to collect so many signatures to get on the ballot. We don't know how many they've collected. It would become effective the first day of the year if it passes, because it would have to go to the ballot. But if property taxes are abolished, that will change everything significantly. In what way? That remains to be seen. So with that, I can answer any questions that I can answer, and the ones that I can, I'll go back and research and get you an answer later.
Thank you so much. I think you shared a difficult subject in a very good way, understandable as much as we can. I was going to say it's clear as mud, but it's not, because you did a great job working with these issues that we asked you to present. So I'll open it up for my colleagues. Vice President Reese, if you have any comments.
Thank you for the presentation. First thing I want to do is, because we're having this presentation and people are out there struggling with property taxes, you are communicating state laws, not county laws. I want to make sure that's identified, because once we bring it here, then people will say it happened here and not up 71 North. The question I have is, these bills that you have identified, have all of them been signed into law by the governor?
They were all signed on December 19th, 2025 by Governor Mike DeWine. All of them except for, I believe, House Bill 186 goes into effect on March 18th, 2026. House Bill 186 went into effect immediately after signature.
Okay. And then all of these, I want to go back to the one slide that you have after we went through all of you said key takeaways. And we can stop at item number 1. These reforms do not cut property taxes. We take that thank you back down. I'm not thanking them for that.
All right, my
Thank you all
clickers.
for there.
Yeah.
Yeah, these do not. So we had all this stuff. Governor had big committee, gonna do all this work, and you come back with something that says none of these reforms will cut property taxes. We are in a 911 right now, not just in the county's budget, we're gonna talk about that later, but in the people that we serve, the reason that we're up here, they're struggling. And this is not to you, Anson, because you don't work for the state. But I just want to be honest, my job for me is that I come here to represent the people that sent me. They're the shareholders, and they're not happy about everything going up. And every time they turn on the news now, you hear the governments are raising taxes, whether it's the state, whether it's the county not doing the 30%, whether it's the city of Cincinnati now wanting to take money for the income tax. It's a tax. Whether you go downtown and enjoy something around anything around 3C DC district, they got a tax on your meal, or after a while we taxing the air, the water. If we think they're gonna try to tax it, we're taxing at a time when people are breaking. And so I'm just so, people just got their thing in the mail. I wanted to see the state just cut the reappraisal. Quit doing these reappraisals every 6 years and going up. People driving by but not going in the house. You didn't do no upgrades to your house, but your property taxes went up. That's what I've been hearing from people. Of course, they say, well, you can come down and you can do all that, and our hands are tied. But my statement to the state is, number one, you did nothing on property taxes until this group put a real threat. And what has happened is that the people said they got to take it in their own hands, because the people that's elected keep going up on their property taxes and won't give the homeowners a break. We've got the bingo deal. We got less of a break for the homeowners, and we're not even in the playoffs. We ain't going to no Super Bowls, and we're trying to now go back to the state and see if we can apply for more money. I'd asked Mr. Ludo yesterday, I said, if we get the state money, can that cut down our money so that we can give something back to the property owner? He said, oh no, this is new money. We'll be going after more money for the Bengals to get, but nothing for the taxpayer. And I've been on a lot of these committees when I was president of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus. And that's why I got off of them, because sometimes you come out, you got nothing. They done passed the buck. DeWine ain't gonna be in there in 2029. They talking about back to going all the way to 2029. And I'm just saying, it's very frustrating for grandma right now to try to hold on to her house. And the letters went out. They're out today. They're out to the people. They have to pay. And I just, it's just a bad message right now. Everywhere we go is some more taxes. But we don't have nothing that will give the people a break. They're at a breaking point. And what I'm concerned about is, because they're at a breaking point, people who normally would support some initiatives that are very important are now telling me they ain't going with it. They got to go no. They got to choose themselves, because we don't care anything about them, the government, when it's time for them. And so I'm looking at this thing, all these bills, and all they did was pass it down, what I call trickle-down taxation. They passed it down to the counties, and you can look at this, and then by 2029, and we won't go up anymore. You already too high. I was looking for them to come with something that's going to help them come down on the taxpayers. So I know it's a tough thing, but when you seeing stuff like income tax, now they're going to take some more money out your check. So your check going to get shorter. Then they come back over here. If you want to go get something to eat, there's a tax around that area, extra tax. Then they come back and say, no relief from the state. Then you come back and say, hey, we're going to do a big bingo deal, but we're going to give you 4% when really you're supposed to get 30%. It's just wrong messaging. And I just can't support it right now when we look at the climate. Now, maybe economy gets better and we get on our feet, we can do more. But the answer is not to tax everybody. They got to say, if you want to be safe, they claim that's a tax. What? What are we talking about? Everything's a tax. What am I paying for now? So I'm so glad in our budget, it was recommended by the administration to do on the transfer tax. If you sell your house, they wanted to tax you. And we got that out of the budget. Yes, I know our budget is tight, and we got to try to help. But if grandma's outside homeless, what did we really do? And so people are coming down here right now trying to pay those property taxes. And I'm disappointed in the governor. I'm disappointed in the state legislature that we did all this going around in circles, and you gave me a pathway, kick the can down. I was hoping they was going to do something to help. We need a right now program. We are a state of emergency program. Now, what I might say might not be popular in the government walls, But you get out here in these streets, whether you're in Anderson Township, Colerain Township, Avondale, Bond Hill, they all saying the same thing. It's too high. In fact, the Landis Powell had put something up recently, just last night. She said, why are we talking about raising taxes right now? She's talking about the city, of course. Costs are up, property taxes are up, rent is up, affordable housing is down, gun violence may be flat, but it feels worse because people are hurting. Wages aren't keeping up, even for folks who are working. This is not the moment, she said, to put more pressure on people who are already barely holding on. Now, we're talking about a middle class person saying this, not the super poor. So I know we're going to have to put I was telling Mr. Ludo, we're going to have to put our thinking caps on. And we got to do it different. We ain't going to be able to do, maybe we can't, it's not going to be a reliance on property tax. We got to figure out something else. We've got to put our creative minds together because we're going to start getting rejected by the people. I heard somebody else say, oh, I did a poll and everybody is for it and everything. These people ain't answering polls, the people I know. But they the ones go to the polls. And we don't want to have what I think it was Addison or somewhere, Adams County, I can't remember one of them. They reject it. So I'm just thinking we need to figure out how to put our thinking caps together. We got to come with, there's a new day. Washington, it's a new day what they doing in Washington. It's crazy, but it's a new day. And we got to come with a new approach. I don't know what it is, but I'm hopeful that all of us can put our thinking caps on. But I want to say that your report is only reporting what the state has done. This is not Anson. This is not the county. And I want to tell you, I'm disappointed in the state, but I'm not shocked. They were doing it when I was there. I always want to kick the can. Always want to, I'm going to put the back down at the county level, and I call it trickle-down taxation, where they can say, we cut taxes. In fact, we were at the convention center, and one of the legislators, senators, Blessing, on Republican, he got up and said, we Republicans, we ain't for taxes, but I know my friends, wait, I wanted to jump up out this thing. So wait a minute. Speak for yourself. I'm not for people losing their homes at all. That's all they got is their little American dream in order to build government-funded buildings. The stadiums are cool, but I know if grandma had to choose, she gonna choose herself. She gonna choose her house. So we got all these they had a big thing today. What about an arena? We got to get back to the families out here that got their little piece of American dream. And then those who are renting. It ain't just ownership, renting. The rent's going up because the owner is going to pass that cost on to the renter. So one way we can't be affordable housing and then go for high property taxes. They don't go together. As we got CMHA in here, but they don't go together. So I would hope that we need a whole restart, and we got to bring some people in and get prepared, because there may be a time where the people might rise up and say, we ain't going for it, because the state never dealt with it until the people start rising up. They wouldn't deal with it. Then they put a committee. That's what you always do. When you want to do something, you go run and get a committee together. I learned that in politics. They run and get a committee together, and then they don't come out with everybody who's on the committee might have had some good ideas, but they might not have made it to the bill. And now these bills you got is just a whole lot of down the road you can stop rising costs. Down the road, the county can make these decisions. It's up to the county. Down the road, but the key thing, and I appreciate you putting this in your report, the key thing to all of this, the governor did all this, meetings and everybody, these reforms do not cut property taxes. And that's what the people are looking for. How can I cut some of this cost? Because the Duke Energy bill going up, water bill done went up. Now the city wants, if you live in the city or you work in the city, they want a piece of your check, a little bit more, so they're gonna get less. How do I survive? And so I just think that's my reaction to the state. and what they did, and that's not us because we're not at the state. But we need to come with a right now program, and just keep taxing the people cannot be the answer. We got to find something else in this climate. Now, economy gets better, and we can do better. But those are my thoughts, and I'm still sticking with it based on what I'm hearing from so many people. There's so many people that done lost their properties. We don't talk about them. And so I just want to reiterate that I'm disappointed in the governor and the legislature, what they came out with. I know the committee might have recommended other things, but what they came out with, they don't have no right now program. And we need a right now, some right now help. So those are my points to this. And that's why we as a county are down here struggling, grappling with what we're grappling with because we don't have a right now program. So I will say my last thing. Some people, when I say what I got to say, that I want to email the people who have lost their homes. You ain't got to convince me. Email the people that are down here struggling to pay. You ain't got to convince me. You got to convince those people out there. And that's why they're trying to take it to the ballot so they can have the power. And I hate that we have gotten to this juncture because like you said, that could be that would be very quick, and we would have to change directions very quickly. And I don't know the answer to what we would be doing, but we need to be thinking about it. So thank you. Those are the comments that I had, and I've asked Mr. Ludo to start thinking if something like that were happen, what adjustments would be recommended to us as a board. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dreehouse.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Anson. It's good to get an update on what the legislature is doing, even though it's all bad news for us. It's still good to know what is happening at the state level. So, and it strikes me that the update is about what did happen and obviously doesn't include what didn't happen, which was a lot of what was recommended to the legislature through the governor's task force. I sat on the task force. It was bipartisan. We had a lot of interesting ideas because it was bipartisan. And some of them were more structural in nature, and some of them were more short-term to provide immediate relief. And as you have stated, the ones that were more structural found their way to the legislature and were passed as pieces of legislation. The more immediate relief, like the circuit breaker, the deferral, homestead exemption, all the things the state could have done to provide some relief to taxpayers and residents in the more immediate were not done. And so I too am disappointed about the lack of action regarding some of those recommendations that came forward. I was the author of some of them, and the state would have been supporting those recommendations financially, and they chose not to do that. So very disappointing. But as you've pointed out, some things did pass. House Bill 335 is the one that impacts us the most because, as your chart shows, there will be a reduction in our revenue because of House Bill 335. There's no question about that. The question is how much. And that will depend on the rate of inflation because our growth is now capped to the rate of inflation. I will speak for myself and say at some point, I do feel an obligation to be part of the solution when it comes to the residents in the community. This is the answer to that. We know we're going to take a hit here at the county. It won't be easy to absorb that, but we also know that the spikes that we saw in the past will not happen because of this reform. And so that is good news for the residents in the community. Couple that with 186, which is about schools, which, as you pointed out, is the biggest portion of the property tax bill. And I think people should know that. We talked about that a year ago, just to lay the landscape, right, of how much we're getting, which is minuscule compared to what the schools get by way of property taxes. But they, too, are held to the rate of inflation. And so that's going to make a huge difference when it comes to people's bills moving forward. And they're also going to see a reduction in revenue. So, that will be difficult for them to absorb. And then the third one about the Budget Commission, This one, and I want to clarify with you, because back when we were talking about the Budget Commission and giving them more authority, really is what was happening on this committee. The one that talked about them being able to review levies that had been passed by the people and say, yeah, we don't think that was reasonable, so we're going to repeal that. To have 3 elected officials given that authority to repeal what the people, this is a democracy we live in, right? It's like the most undemocratic thing I've ever heard. People vote for something, and 3 elected officials get to say, yeah, we don't think that was a good idea. That, to me, really struck a chord. And so I tried to, others tried to, put some parameters around that, because you can see it rolling down the track, right? It's not like we were going to be able to stop that, but what's the time frame? What needs to happen? Do the taxing authorities, like the levy, let's say JFS, for instance, with Children's Services Levy, do they get an opportunity to come in front of this panel and explain why they needed what they needed? And we're about to hear a presentation about all of this, by the way, and explain it to this commission so that at least they've got the knowledge base to take the action that they're going to take. So were those parameters included in this added authority for the Budget Commission, both by way of time frame and allowing the taxing authorities to come in and explain what had happened?
Very good point. So the way the law is written, that the CBC can't touch it for the first year. And then after that, before they can lower it, if they're going to do that, the organization, the taxing authority, they can come in and they have to have a public hearing, and they need to explain why they need the money. So yeah, both of those things. There are some parameters that are involved with this new law.
So a year is good. It's not great. We were hoping for a much longer period of time, because these levies run for 5 years. And so it's just concerning. I just want to put that out there. This is concerning, because we're about to talk about a levy. And this community relies on levies to fund really important services, whether they're mandated or not. Children's Services is a really good example of that. And so to have a commission given this authority, I think it's troubling. So anyway, the legislature does what they do. And the other piece of all of this, too, is because the legislature behaves in the way they do, and they have refused to take responsibility for funding schools in the state of Ohio, which is their responsibility, by the way, and they've pushed all that down to the local level, and now we've got high property taxes because of that, because the state is simply not doing their part. It's been ruled unconstitutional. They don't care. They're still not doing it. And then also refusing to provide this immediate relief for the citizens of the state of Ohio is concerning. And so we are left then to make up the difference, which we are doing here in House Bill 335. The schools are doing it in 186, but you'll see on that list the state's not included. So they have not done their part to provide relief. And so we are dealt this hand. I have asked some of the legislators, we did run into them recently, and I said to, I think it was Blessing, hey, can we expect any more tax relief bills coming from the legislature? They've passed 4. They were all structural in nature. None of them did immediate relief. Is there something coming? And he said he would not be optimistic about that. So just want to provide that by way of context. So I appreciate the update. We'll see how we do in the upcoming budgets. This means more cuts for the county. So it's going to be even more challenging in the next year. But I do appreciate you digging in and providing us with the information. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. As I said, did you have a comment?
I just had one thing I needed to make sure.
Okay, as related.
Related
Okay.
to that. Just one more thing. I wanted to let everyone know I am renewing my call, because there's another play in this potentially. But we can't let the governor off the hook. I'm renewing my call to the governor through an executive order to put a temporary freeze on senior citizen property taxes. And he can do that. The tax commissioners appointed by him, and maybe the legislature had to come with these bills because they had to compromise, and I agree with my colleague. They left out some of the meat. They left a lot of meat on the bones out. But I'm calling on the governor in this state of emergency to, through executive order, put a temporary freeze so we can help seniors get through this tough time for senior citizens, because we didn't see anything really for seniors. So I just wanted to let my colleagues know that again, and I'm going to renew that call because I think our seniors, a lot of people have been talking about seniors up at the state, but they didn't, like you said, when it came to this, they didn't take action that would happen right now. So I agree. So I'm calling on him to use his we see a lot of executive orders coming out of Washington. I'd like to see some coming out the state, but this one to help senior citizens in this tough time.
Thank you. The legislation that relates to no property tax, does it have a House bill number, or it's just the people are pushing it?
It's a grassroots organization.
Okay, very good. So when do they have to have their petitions in?
I'll have to do research on that. I want to give you a correct timeline.
July.
And
Is it July? Okay.
okay, and they have to have. I know there's a number that they have to have. Do you know?
It's like 440.
It's over 400,000.
Yeah, and it has to be from at least half of the counties. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it's placed on the ballot, and then of course the voters would have to approve it.
And if that happens, it would devastate our county and every other county. We'll be in big trouble, no doubt about it. I'm going to ask some numbers, and maybe Jeff may have the numbers that I need as it relates to property taxes in 24 and 25. What did we pull in for
I can tell you
Hamilton
those.
County? You have the answer?
Yes.
Yeah.
In 2024, we pulled in approximately $53 million in property taxes.
Okay.
In 2025, we pulled in $56 million in property taxes. The general fund budget in 2024 was $395 million, which means about 13.5% of that was property tax. And in 2025, our general fund budget dropped a little bit. It was $389 million, which means it was about 14.4% in property taxes.
Thank you so much for that information, Anson.
And what Anson is detailing is related to the general fund of the county. We will later on in this staff meeting be discussing one specific levy. The county, as the board is aware, we have numerous voted levies out there that support a host of social and community program services, whether it's children's services, seniors, developmental disabilities, all of those funded through property taxes. And the total amount of those is I don't have the total, but hundreds of millions of dollars. Children's services levy $80 million alone. So just to supplement on top of the general fund portion,
Right.
The impact would be enormous.
Devastating.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that additional information. And as we were saying earlier, it is a trickle-down effect. I mean, the state says what they want, and it passes, and then we get the impact. Almost like all those unfunded mandates that we oftentimes get. We've been saying for many years, and Commissioner Driehaus brought it up, about funding for the schools. I mean, there has to be a remedy. 40, 50 years, I know we've been talking about the state needs to do a better job of funding schools. So lastly, my comment would be that we have to vote. We have to tell our legislators what we want. They work for us. We have to go up there and down here and vote, and they need to know that there's some opposition to what's going on. And so we also, as commission board members, we have to tell the story. Everyone, I would love to not have property taxes, but who will it impact if we don't have property taxes? So we have the responsibility of telling the story. And you were saying all of them go into law in March, except for, is it 186 was the one?
Yes, that was effective immediately.
Okay, very good. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you for the news. We need to know it. We need to be proactive. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Did you have something?
I just said
Okay.
thank you, Anson.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So we'll move on to our next item, item 3, preserving affordable housing in Hamilton County. Gregory Johnson, the CEO of Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing, is here to present. Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. How's everybody doing this morning?
We were doing pretty good.
Well, I wish I could shed some bright light, but I have some light, and a lot of my conversation is built around a couple asks. But I think that the asks are doable and very much needed in our community based on the last conversation. Yeah, I don't talk very loud, so I got to make sure I stay close to this. So I'll run through the presentation and really ask for a partnership. So thank you for the invite of being able to present this morning the information. I'll just do as an overview. I have a ask of preserving affordable housing, which we need more of, but definitely preserving and making the housing that we do have better. And then something that you guys have talked about this morning and been talking about for quite a few years, preventing homelessness because of rental hikes in our community. So hopefully you will get an opportunity to kind of weigh in on a couple of these things. So over 6% of the people in Hamilton County live in subsidized housing. It's the highest share of any county in Ohio. 39,000 people, over 39,000 people, CMHA touches through housing in our programs. And I have a separation over 27,000 with families, vouchers, over 8,000 in our public housing, and over 3,000 in our conversion or preserving of affordable housing. And so that's where we've taken some conventional public housing and made it mixed income. But the biggest part about is doing some improvements, and we've done about $264 million of improvements to a little over 1,500 units in Hamilton County. In our voucher program, 74%, we're talking about children and families, elderly 8%, and disabled is 18%, which is a very high rate. Then we're talking about in our conventional program of public housing, we have, again, 81% families and kids, 7% elderly, and 12% disabled. And then in the units that we've preserved throughout, 68% families, 24% elderly, and an 8% disabled. I go over those demographics to kind of set the stage for the continuation of preserving affordable housing in our community. So we're embarking on a 27-unit preservation, and we want to keep these units in our community, and it continues to give us the opportunity to diversify the housing that we are providing to families. And so we have currently we're investing into 15 of those properties. It's a total of 27, and the remainder of the properties, 9 properties, need about a little over $4 million of investment. And what I have here is a few pictures of the rehabilitated properties. They're all in the county. They're all in desirable areas. They all are associated with kids going into different school districts from Anderson Township, Coleraine, and all of areas in the county. And as you can see, the finishes that we've been able to finish and what we've been able to do to units. The big picture is that we're preserving much needed affordable housing, diversifying that housing for families and individuals throughout Hamilton County. Here is a list of the properties that we're proposing that we need a little over $2 million to preserve these units with these addresses. As you can see, Westchester Township, Norwood, Columbia Township, Delhi, all of these are areas of opportunity for families, and which is really, really important for school districts and families that are looking for affordable housing throughout Hamilton County. So I want to talk about a couple of the benefits of this partnership. Preserving affordable housing, obviously, supports local jobs and economic viability, and then gives families stability and thrive, allowing them to invest in their children's education and think about job mobility and things like that instead of where they're going to live. And then it strengthens our community and strengthens those neighborhoods where these properties are located as well. So that's the first ask as it pertains to a little over $2 million to preserve 9 units of affordable housing in Hamilton County. So then the next ask in preventing homelessness due to rising rents, just a little bit of demographics, 34% is residential property values increase. I think you just talked about that a couple minutes ago. 15% year over year increase in rent. And then we have an 8% of eviction filings that are gone up in Hamilton County. And this is due to non-payment, and a lot of that is because of the rents are going up. And then the landlords are facing higher costs and also trying to improve their property values as well. Then just to talk about a little bit about the homeless persons that CMHA already has partnerships. So this concept is that a person is not homeless yet. And I think that's the key. If we can get to people before they become homeless, that's a priceless proposition for all of us, because then they don't go into the emergency room. They don't go into some of the social services that we're all worried about getting funded and providing those services. We can keep them in stable housing before they get into that system. So just to talk about a little bit about CMHA also helps the other side of people that are homeless and have to go through the process. And we help about a little over 1,300 adults, a little over 300 kids, and over 400 homeless veterans. All of this is through partnerships with strategies and other partners in the community, LAD, Independent Alliance, CPS, which is a huge partner, Hamilton County Reentry, Fostering Youth, and Veteran Affairs. So we partner with all of those organizations and do over 2,000 referrals with a similar type partnership and program that we already have, and this is just for the homeless. And we pour in about $23 million to help support those referrals during the course of the year. So this partnership looks to be like this. Together with a $185,000 investment, we could build a strong partnership with Hamilton County, CMHA, and we believe we can help about 100 families. And how this would work would be that if a family has a rent hike and they can't pay their rent, then there will be a referral process. And as we're going through that referral process, and if they qualify for a voucher, the $185,000 would help them with their rent until they got through the referral process and qualify for a voucher, and then CMHA would take on from there. So really, it would be preventing families from being evicted, and they can stay into stable housing through this partnership. And what we're using is together public-public partnership, but what we're doing is leveraging funds, long-term funds and short-term funds, to help families that need help right away. Just a prime example, the Housing Authority Board was able to listen to a presentation and actually think outside the box and approve some policy changes that allowed us to step in and help the families, the seniors that were at Victory Vista. And the average, each one of those families qualified for a voucher. Each one of those families now are paying less than what they were paying. And the highest amount of reduction is over $400 for one of those seniors that are staying in the same place, which is a quality place. They're not facing eviction anymore. Now they're paying $400 less a month in rent. And that's a win, win, win for the community, for the family, and they're not going into any systems or anything like that. So that's what the premise is. This partnership is based on. And again, just some of the benefits, critical housing, affordable housing in neighborhoods across Hamilton County. It'll be an expansion, reduces eviction, allows families to focus on what matters most, supporting their kids' education, putting food on the table, trying to get a better job, and then reduces public costs, emergency services, shelters, and other social services that they would not have to go into any of those particular systems. And then as closing, a little over $2 million. That $2 million could be done in 2 years, where we could rehab those units over a 2-year time frame. The $185,000, again, it is a partnership where we would partner with a third party to bring them in to go through a process. We already have a referral process set up with a few community partners that would be ideal for this. And then we'll be doing job creation, preventing, lowering eviction, EMT calls, police visits, court visits, and you're talking less than $3 million to do all that for families on preservation of affordable housing and helping families where they are, when they need it, if they qualify for a voucher at the time. So that's my presentation. And do you have any questions?
Thank you so much for your presentation. I will open it up, Vice President Reese.
Thank you for the presentation, and in the presentation you made last year when we were talking about what can be done, I first want to thank you. There was a lot in the media about 11 seniors, and I know a lot of people felt bad about it, and you were able to work through CMHA and get those 11 seniors not kicked out, but able to have a voucher and be able to stay there. And that was huge. So I want to thank you for that. I've got to see where, what I know we have some funding for affordable housing that we had additional, and I wasn't so excited to just put it at CDF. We've done, I don't know, about $40 million with CDF. And so I'm not against that, but wanted to look at diversification and seeing how we might be able to help people right now while we are investing, obviously, in future stuff. And so I would have to look at Mr. Ludo and see what our funds are, but I'm intrigued to look at the 185 at a minimum to try to help people right now that can get people in housing right now, because our goal obviously has been affordable housing and getting people housed. So that's number one. Number two, certainly open to see what are the other long-term investments, open to that. But I also had mentioned to you, or you had mentioned, I think maybe at the meeting or to me, I can't remember, about you CDF and trying to help find some land, and I don't know if Commissioner Dumas will talk more probably about that. I don't want to take your part of it, but I know the tiny homes, but you were having land, and I think all of us were kind of frustrated about that. But I know you'll probably talk more about that, but maybe in that comment, I'd like to hear more about that type of partnership and then what we do, or have we already done something? I'm not sure.
So just a couple comments. Thank you for that. The 185, that would be critical, and that would be critical for people to stay in their homes. So they already have a place. They just they had a rent hike and they can't afford it.
Are you going to speak to the tiny home?
I'm getting ready.
Can we hold that?
Sure.
Yeah, no, that was it about I would like for Mr. Ludo to get back with us to see. I'm very interested in the 185. I'm also interested in the 2 million, what that would include, and maybe in your comments later, if it includes that, I'd like to know that as well. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Dreehouse.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Greg. Appreciate it. Thank you for all that you do for people in this community. It's critically important that you do well so that they do well. So we appreciate the partnership. So I am, and we've talked before about some of the projects that are coming up through CMHA. I know that you did receive ARPA dollars through CDF. Can you remind us what those were used for and how much?
Yeah, so we actually used quite a few projects. Logan Commons that we just completed construction is down by Finley Market. We got dollars from there. We received dollars from Mariana Terrace, which is in Lincoln Heights, and that we completed that project as well. And we received, we just received a new grant that we're working on. We haven't started the construction on yet either. In total, all of our applications that we've submitted to Hamilton County, we've gotten some funding, and that funding totals a little over $3.5 million. And the critical thing about that is that all of that funding is gap filler and it is grant. And so that's what's so critical about what I'm asking for today, as far as a little over $2 million, is that they're single families, and it's very, very hard to find an investor or a bank or a lender that will invest in scattered property, but having those properties are really critical. And the key to it is that it's grant. So we're keeping it affordable. And it'll keep it affordable for those families long term. But the Hamilton County has been great partner to CMHA as we, over the last years, have been starting the new build. West Union, you guys are there for West Union, that opening and that new construction. That was another just a little over $1 million that you guys put into that as well. So we have at least 4 new construction projects since I've been here that Hamilton County has supported and put money in, which is West Union, Logan, the Reserve on South Martin, and Cary Crossing. And the only one that's in the city is Logan for seniors. And the rest are all out in the county. And the preservation of Mariana Terrace.
Right. So, and as we directed CDF a number of years ago now, to focus on creating new housing, but also preserving housing so that we don't have people losing their housing at the same time we're trying to provide more. And so there's this balance there. And so you have been a huge part of that equation when it comes to preservation of housing for some of the folks in our community that are most challenged. So I appreciate that. I couldn't remember how many projects there were and what the dollar amounts were. And so we've got some money sitting over at CDF. I know they haven't gone through all of it. I don't know if all of it's spoken for either. And so I would be, from my vantage point, interested in knowing if they could look at this 185 and say, well, that's something that obviously fits what we have put forward as a priority, and try to fund it through some of the funds that are remaining over at CDF, and then take a look at the extra $2 million. From my understanding, too, as we always do, we've got these rounds of ARPA funds that they kind of waterfall to the bottom if a project doesn't happen or if it comes in under budget, which is not very often, or something changes where we've got the opportunity.
And I'll be willing to grab them all.
Well, that's what I'm getting there. But we have to prioritize where that money goes. If we find ourselves with $1 million that is still on the table, has to be spent by the end of 2026, right? So we're under a time clock here, and then trying to figure out what the priorities are. And we've done free-store food bank. We've done other things. Food security is a big deal as well. But maybe in the next round, which hopefully will be coming up soon, we can think about, because housing is such a high priority, and it has been for this commission for years, maybe providing more resources to CDF so that you can take advantage of those resources with some direction from us as to some of it's new housing, but some of it has to be spent on preservation.
That would be great. And the key to it is that a grant. And because some of this, for the 9 units, it's not gap filler. It's part of the 27 unit. And we actually applied to the federal government. And we got dollars from there to put into to start the 15 units that we are doing now. Because, again, we can't float any debt, because if we float any debt on these units, we're subject to lose those units over time just because of the volume, and they're critical. But I had a meeting yesterday with Miss Angela, someone that just started here, and correct, in which we had a really, really good meeting, and I talked to her about both of these ideas. She did speak about the $1 million, and I believe you guys have a meeting later this week. So, but I am definitely there to grab up those dollars. But the key, the big picture is that because I have rolling projects, I'm always looking for gap filler so I can do preservation, because what we want to do is do the right amount of rehab and preserve the right units in the right places is what we're trying to do.
Well, I appreciate the partnership with the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Just thank you once again for your presentation. My colleagues have made great comments, and I thank Commissioner Reese for bringing up about the tiny home since it's come up. The question was always, we don't have any land. And then you called me from watching our meeting, the one person who watches, and said, we have land. Oh my God. So you got together with CDF, correct me about any of this that it's not correct, and that you also have vouchers that could be used, like a wraparound service. And so my understanding from the information I received lately is that it takes 18 to 24 months to build, and that would be beyond the limit of time for us to expend the monies. So is that correct? Is there any way you could start the building process before the end of the time, 12/31 of 26?
So you actually are correct, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one that watches, but I do watch. But no, we're not in the building side of it. My big picture for me was I kind of saw an idea where I could help and fit in, and I don't have to be the only, or the big, doer of the project. And so what's happened between now and then is that we offered the land, the individuals that were putting the project together. They looked at it, we got an appraisal, we gave them the number, but what they have since done is said that they found some other land that they were more interested in, that's being sold by a church, which I'm not sure or familiar what church it is, and that they want, or they think that space is better for them. And then on the other side, they're called VASH vouchers, the veteran vouchers. They've had conversations with the VA. We've had conversations with the VA, and the VA is willing to partner. And so we're willing to partner with the vouchers and attaching the vouchers to the tiny homes. So that part of it has been talked about, and everybody's on board with that part. Now it's the other part of actually getting the land so they can do the construction. And so I actually don't know where they are with that, because they kind of stepped away from my land offer. And I'm just kind of waiting for them to come back with when for the voucher side.
Very good. And the tiny homes were supposed to be for veterans anyway, so that coordination and partnership, once again, is great.
And they'll get services from the VA because the VASH vouchers come with services, so it's a win-win-win, and it reduces the operational costs for services when those homes do get built.
Okay, great. A couple other comments. I heard you say at the beginning that Hamilton County has the highest number of subsidized housing in all the counties. That's discouraging. I mean, because we work so hard, we put so much money into affordable housing, subsidized housing. We have to do better, and I know you have been working almost too hard to make that happen. But I know we're a larger county, so that is part of the deal. But the other thing that disturbed me is that the families and children that are impacted, and 74% receive vouchers that have children, and then 81% receive public housing. And we think about our babies and trying to find a place to sleep and then go to school and learn and all of that. I just want to see those numbers come down, and I know they will, but that is just very disturbing. I had a more technical question. Your vouchers, how much monetarily, not how many vouchers do you have, but how much of the money, the value do you have that you can spend?
The voucher program has grown since COVID because of the cost of rent hikes and things like that. So there is a number that HUD caps on in a housing authority, depending on your size, where you are, and things like that. And there's different ways to grow it, but our number is a little over 11,800. And then it comes down to depending on what the average cost is. And in one of the slides, our average cost in our community of where we subsidize is a little over $900 a month per family. And so what that looks like as far as a budget number, it's a little over $100 million that we give every year annually to help supply. And what that equates to is a little over 9,300, and as of this morning, 44 vouchers that we're funding. And so there's always vouchers that are coming off and coming on. So it's always a push and pull. And if you look at the big picture and say, well, what is the break even of how much money you have and the number of vouchers? So we have enough funding that where we could probably add another 300 families to the program, because there's families always in that pattern.
Because I had heard you were out of vouchers, and that's not true.
Correct. So that was a lot of housing authorities across the country are in what we call a shortfall. And basically what's happened is that the rents have gone up, families have not gone off the program, and the voucher funding has stayed at a certain number. What we have to do is continue to have issue vouchers so people can look, because there's people coming off, and kind of keep that level piece. And sometimes if it gets unbalanced, that's where you get into what's called a shortfall situation.
Very good. And another couple of words that you said is we want them to stay in their homes, and whatever program we can use to make that happen, because once you become homeless, it's so hard to reestablish yourself. So
especially the kids. I'm thinking about the kids, and then our most vulnerable is our seniors and disabled. So once they get into a homeless situation, it's very, very hard to get out of that whole cycle.
Okay. And I think lastly is the 185,000, which both of my colleagues talked about. I'm extremely interested in looking at trying to subsidize those. There were some strategies brought up about where we can get that money from. And so rather than asking, the money is there in different places, we need to, as a board, say we want this money to go towards CMHA. Is there a name of that program?
No, actually, to be totally honest with you, I just came up with the concept from listening. Actually, when I was here before, when we were talking about the food stamps and SNAP and all of that, because what you guys are trying to do is prevention before something dropped off. And so it's the same concept of trying to do prevention before the next stage happens to families and individuals. So you actually have the opportunity to name it, since you're going to be a major partner in it.
Right. So we'll definitely give it a name. A name has a little bit more impact. People can recognize and say, I want to get on that program. So I'd like to direct our administrator to take a look at that concept and I want to bring it forward as quickly as possible. If my colleagues are in agreement, you can think about it, and then before the end of the month, have some resolution to be able to adopt that, to at least move forward with the 185,000. And I see heads nodding, so that's a good thing. Okay?
Yeah, we'll take a look at it, come back to the board with the report and the resolution.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so
No,
much.
thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Well, that wasn't too bad. We got a little good news, huh? Okay, our next item, item 4, is Children's Services Levy Update. John Nelson, our Interim Director of Hamilton County Job and Family Services, please come forward. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for the opportunity to present this morning. I wish, as interim director, I had my first presentation was a little bit more positive than what I'm going to share with you all today. And I understand the weight of this presentation, not just on us as JFS employees, but also on this commission, on the entire county, as well as the many partners that work with JFS, without whom we won't be able to do the work that we do at JFS. And some of them are here today in the room, and I want to acknowledge them. Also want to acknowledge the many partners who are probably joining us virtually to learn about what we're doing. And I know there's lots of questions. I know some information was shared where there was some questions about what it means for JFS funding for various organizations in the community. And I'm hopeful that today's presentation will kind of help clarify some of that. But I do have our team from JFS here, many subject matter experts. So hopefully, if there's any question that arises through my presentation, I'll be able to address those questions. But if they're specific to subject matter, we've got our subject matter experts as well to address those questions. So again, thank you, Commissioner, for the opportunity. If it's okay, I'll go ahead and get started with my slide deck. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
So again, commissioners, where I wanted to start this entire presentation was with back in 2021, JFS received what was called the recommendations from the TLRC. And as part of the recommendations, one of the top recommendations that JFS got was to increase and retain staff, increase the diversity of staff leadership, increase services and support of older youth, address homelessness and threats of homelessness and family stability and child welfare, enhance communication, collaboration, and partnership with community members and stakeholders, and then increase community-based programming, expansion of community health, and education supports of children, and safety culture enhancements. So these were basically recommendations that were given to JFS by our TLRC. It was also part of the PCG report at that point in time, the consultants report. And based on that, they gave us this projection here in 2021. They said, if you are able to implement all of these programs successfully, this is how the levy balance is going to trend. It's going to start at about $125 million, and through the course of the 5 years, it's going to reduce the balance from $125 million down to a $25 million cash balance at the end of 2026. So this is basically the path that was already set for our children's services levy. But over the years, a few things that I think the consultant was not able to really predict was, one, the impacts of COVID-19 on our young people, and of course, inflation as well. So I think we all have experienced inflation. I think today's presentations on just the cost of housing and rental and the utility bills, I think all kind of talks to this idea of that everyone is facing these challenges. So the next slide that I want point out is our actual current levy projections and where we are in terms of our levy projections. So as you can see, the purple line actually trends a little bit higher than the orange line as we started off the levy cycle in 2022. So we actually started with a slightly higher levy balance than that was anticipated, which was $125 million. And then we basically projected it out. And you see there is a point where these two lines basically overlap in 2024. And with us ending our 2025 levy balance at $40 million, which the consultant said that we'd be probably finishing closer to 56 million. So in essence, 2024 is the first time those two lines have crossed over. As we are, or 2025 is the first time those lines have crossed over. As we look at the 4 years of the levy that has already passed, there's several programs that we've implemented in the course of these programs. So the big ones are our prevention efforts. So we've spent anywhere between $5 to $8 million each year on youth employment programming from the levy. We've done prevention grants of $2 million. We've done wage adjustments reopeners with our bargaining unit, which ended up costing the agency about $1.2 million. We did negotiated contract increases for our network partners. We did a 12% adjustment in 23. We did a 3% adjustment in 3% adjustment, resulting in 3.7 million increases. And then in 2025, we set the limit to 4%, not to exceed 4%. And then in 2026, we've decided to freeze it because of the current situation. We also did an additional wage adjustment schedule in 2024 as well. This was a scheduled wage adjustment, so another $1 million per year in 24, $400K in 2025 and 26. So a lot has been done in terms of employee retention, in terms of also supporting our placement organizations that are taking care of our children every day, and just providing all the needs that the community, taking care of all the needs that the community has asked us to take care of. So when we find ourselves here, I did want to highlight a few things as part of the presentation. So one of the things that changed between 21 and 22 was the end of the Protect Ohio waiver. That was almost $20 million in revenue that we were receiving from the state that disappeared. So that $20 million was directly helping us do a lot of placements. So that was a support that was removed from us in 2021. And so starting 2022, we were more heavily dependent on levy and the 4E reimbursements that we were getting. An additional part of it was you'll see that in 22 and 23, we still had a lot of other community programs that were helping our children and our families. For example, we had ERAP, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. So when we had families that were in imminent danger of homelessness or needed rental assistance or needed mortgage assistance, we had a program to refer them to. Once that program ended, a lot of those pressures started showing up on the levy side of things as well, when we had families that were looking for housing stability. In addition, another thing that I wanted to point out as well is the Child Tax Credit Program, which was a federal program. A lot of families with children used to get, during the COVID time, additional payments, monthly payments for children as well. So all of that was taken away in a very short time. And I think the levy felt a lot of the burden of a lot of those COVID-19 programs going away, and the levy had to step in and take on a lot of those pressures. And that's why I think you're kind of seeing that point of overlap kind of leading right into that 23-24 cycle, when a lot of those community supports were pulled back as part of the scale down as well. Another part that I really want to stress is the mental health of our children. It is really difficult to see the impact that COVID-19 has had on our children. as they're returning back to schools, as they're returning back to the community. And even as we see a lot of children with mental health challenges, we feel like a lot of that has really been escalated to a new level. So much as to our placement partners are talking about it, and as part of it, they need to put in additional supports, additional staffing, and able to just to enable the children to have a safe environment for themselves, but also for the children that are in the same housing setting with them as well. So a lot of pressures there for sure. So as we talk about revenue sources and expense drivers, I just want to bring this slide because I wanted to talk about the two large expenditures versus the two largest revenue items on the levy side of things. So if you look at it, the cost of care last year was $91 million. The cost of children's services only payroll, so this is not the public assistance side, this is only children's services side, was $30 million. So that put together is $121 million just to cover cost of care and payroll, not including all of the other things that the levy also supports, like the GALs, like in medical care and mental health. So just those two items, the cost was $121 million. The levy generates about $78 million, and then the reimbursement, federal reimbursements, estimated anywhere between $35 to $40 million. So we're already seeing that what we're bringing in terms of revenue is not even covering the two largest items that we're spending. So we're starting in a certain sense with a step back already. And so all of the other services that the levy is providing now is directly pulling from the balance. I think the community has asked this question. I think the questions asked from this dais as well a number of times as to what happened to the cash balance of children's services levy. You know, we started at $125 million. Where did the $100 million go? And I think this is a perfect example of where that $100 million went. The $100 million went for the care of our children, our community, to provide youth employment programs, to provide placement, care, and supports for our children, for our kids that are 18 to 21, making sure that they're housing secure, making sure that they stay in school and that they get the education that they need in order to be successful in their life. So at this point in time, I want to go back to where Director Patton had left off when he gave you all a presentation in December. He had talked about some potential reductions to the various programs. And I wanted to take the time today and kind of talk through each one of those areas and talk about what those reductions mean, because it's easy to say, hey, I'm going to reduce this number by 8 million or reduce this program by 5 and 6. But what impacts do those have on the community, on the people, on our children, most importantly? And I'm hoping to do that today is kind of walk through those line items and tell you about what those impacts are. And these are very difficult decisions for JFS. Even as we sat down, I know that our team argued back and forth on what would be the best for our children in care, for our families, for our community organizations, and just want everyone listening to know that these were not easy decisions to make, even to put on a slide and bring up here to the commissioners. So the first thing, so we talked about these $8 million, $1 million, $500 million, $500K, 450, 530, and I'm going to rush through these slides because I'm going to drill down a little bit into each of those items here in the upcoming slides here. But some of those expenses are going to get moved to the general fund. Some of those expenses are also going to get moved to the other levies as well, and I'll cover that also in detail shortly. But let's go to the clinical impact. So the two things that's going to really have a clinical impact on our children directly and how our caseworkers deliver the service. One is going to be the independent living contracts. That is for youth 18 to 21. So we could technically emancipate children the moment they turn 18. That is something that's allowable for JFS to do. But a lot of the children that are 18 may not be ready to be emancipated. And I think we all have had 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds have met, cousins, brothers, sisters, and we know that most children are not fully independent at 18 or 19. They still need some amount of support. And that is the opportunity that keeping kids in independent care allows us to do, is to make sure we're parenting them beyond 18 years of age, if they so choose to be parented. And so a lot of this also helps prevent homelessness. Foster youth and youth in care in general are higher risk of homelessness when they leave the system. So just allowing them a couple more years where they can go and live in a place of security and make sure that they get their GED. A lot of times the kiddos are so behind on education, or they've had to miss a year, or they had to repeat a year, that they might not have their high school diploma yet. And so just allowing them to be able to get their high school diploma when they're still in JFS custody gets them a head start in life, so that they now have a high school diploma, so that they now can go out and do something with their life, and they have the credentials, they have a high school diploma. So that's basically what this portion, the youth 18 to 21, really does. And right now there's about 180 children that fit into this category. So I talked with our clinical staff, and we're spending about $16 million each year on these 180 children. At least last year we spent $16 million. And why is the bill so high on that is because once they reach 18 to 21, we don't get federal dollars for those children anymore. So that is all 100% local. So that's fully local levy dollars that are supporting those children. So as a clinical team, we sat down and we had to have some difficult discussions. So our clinical team believes that we could potentially look at some of those children and finding them other supports in the community, and maybe finding them housing, finding them other wraparound services, so that they could go emancipate from the JFS system a little bit earlier, especially ones that have finished their high school and are headed to college. Maybe we'll be able to emancipate them a little bit earlier. Again, we're going to look at this case by case, because it is a complex situation. I know Margie and Alex are here, and they're going to pretty much look at it case by case and see if each child is ready to leave custody or not, and then figure out what would be the best wraparound services that they would be able to get in order to be successful in society. And just look at all the various other risk elements as well, for homelessness, for the opportunity to get into the wrong crowd or wrong situation. So all of that's going to be taken into consideration. But we believe that if we do it well and we do it right, without compromising on the care of the children and making sure that the children's needs are put first, we believe that we may be able to reduce that down to $8 million in 2026. So that's a targeted 50% reduction in what we spent last year. The next clinical part is the hiring slowdown. We're looking at our vacancy rate. So we've done a really wonderful job at JFS. One of the priorities that we were given by the TLRC was to increase and retain employees, and we've done a really good job. We've really dropped the number of vacancies that we've got. But as part of it, as we are looking at it, so in the past, we've always had this buffer in our budget because we knew that we'd never be able to fill all of our positions. But as we're getting to that 100%, 90%, 95%, vacancy, fully staffing rate, we're looking at it and say, okay, now it's costing us a lot more. So we're not going to stop recruiting. We're still going to hire people, but we're going to let off the foot on the gas a little bit. We're not going to pump the brakes, but we want to be able to let the natural workforce process take its course. Right now, we spend a lot of time in recruiting and going out into the community, talking about opportunities. So we're going to back off just a little bit. We're still going to focus heavily on rehiring and hiring essential positions. So these are positions that are important for clinical work, but the additional support services that might be in place, we're going to try to back down on that a little bit in order to allow for a little bit more room in our budget in order for us to land where we need to land as we approach the end of the year. So just in terms of what this means, I just created a summary sheet after each impact statement here. So on the clinical impact side, so we're looking at a current spending rate of 16 million on the independent living contracts and 30 million on the hiring slowdown. We're going to reduce independent living by 8 million, which is a 50% reduction. Hiring slowdown is going to be a 5% targeted reduction, which is going to reduce by 5 million. We're going to retain $25 million in funding, which is 17% reduction on the clinical impacts here. On the program side, we're looking at kinship families. So the county, Hamilton County, was one of the first ones to go down the road of doing kinship, and it's been an extremely, extremely successful program. It's helped lower cost for us and have our kids in a family setting, which is very helpful. We're so thankful for the grandmas, grandpas, uncles, aunties who've stepped up and taken care of the children. So by no means do we want to ever impact this program in a negative way. But as we are looking at our kinship families, we're looking at the stipends that they're receiving. So as this board knows really well, we were the first ones to start the stipend program. So currently what we're doing is the county starts its stipend program, and then we try to qualify the families to the state stipend as well. And so when they qualify for both stipends, they begin to receive both stipends. We've kind of kept that as the norm. So they receive the county stipend, they receive the state stipend. Going forward, what we're thinking is just in order to balance the budget, is that we will start them on the county stipend and try to get them qualified for the state stipend. But the moment the state stipend kicks in, we will basically scale down the county stipend at that point in time. So they will receive a stipend at all times. It'll either be a county stipend or a state stipend, but it will be down to one stipend opposed to them receiving both stipends. And the families that are already receiving both stipends, we're going to grandfather them in and just leave them there and make sure that they don't feel any of the impacts of some of this rollout as well. So this will just be new families coming in going forward from this point on. In terms of vouchers for children's services, so the agency receives a lot of vouchers. This is, again, going back to that family stabilization where I talked about how much we depended on a lot of those ARPA-related dollars that were in the community in terms of ERAP, in terms of other services, rent and utility assistance. Now we're kind of dependent on the levy on that. We do a lot in terms of vouchers to stabilize families so that children can go back to their families and be safe and be taken care of. So as we're looking at this, we're asking caseworkers to really look at how they're spending the children's services vouchers and looking at saying, hey, is there other opportunities to redirect to other vouchers that might be federally reimbursable? And there are some options. We are working on the public assistance side to ramp up some of those, the ability to handle some of the volume on those kinds of vouchers as well. So instead of just going to the levy as our first option, we're trying to be a little bit creative and see if we can find some additional federal dollars that might be able to help with offsetting some of these voucher expenses. So that was basically budgeted at, we spent about $2.8 million last year in levy funds, and we're reducing it by $300,000 there. Program impacts in terms of reductions to caseworkers. So this is basically when caseworkers go out with families and they're working with families. Occasionally what caseworkers will do is they will spend money from their own pocket and then they will turn around and reimburse those dollars. We're just making a very small cut in this in terms of reducing it by 114,000. So still allowing about $400,000 in reimbursements available for caseworkers to be reimbursed, but just trying to control the cost a little bit there and say, okay, hey, maybe there's a better way to get them a voucher to Meijer so that they can buy groceries instead of the caseworkers having to pay for groceries from their own pocket. So this will ultimately benefit also the caseworkers as well, because they wouldn't have to front the money and be reimbursed by the county at a later point as well. Just putting in more supports upfront for the caseworkers in order to get the families the support that they need from the beginning. So. In terms of the prosecuting attorney's office, we had basically asked, the prosecuting attorney's office had asked for an increase in 2026. We basically told them that given our situation, we're unable to give them an increase at this point in time. Laura Wolf had and Margie Weaver had a meeting with Steve Simon, and I think they were in agreement that this might not be a good time for an increase. So we've kept that contract flat at $3 million. So this is basically the program impacts overall in terms of the stipends and where we are. So again, we're retaining significant amount of funding. So no program has been cut beyond 25%. So we've basically tried to make those reductions as little as possible. We've tried to sharpen our pencils very closely on this. So this I know is a topic that I know everyone's extremely interested in. I know a lot of the community members are very curious as to where we are going with this in terms of the impacts on the community organizations. And so I'm going to highlight each organization and talk about each program that is going to be impacted. So in terms of Kids in School Rule, we spent about $1.6 million with Kids in School Rule, which is a program done by Legal Aid Society of Greater Cincinnati. An increase was requested, and we basically told them that request will be denied. So in essence, we're keeping $1.6 million in funding from 2025. So it is a 0% reduction, but it is going to keep that contract flat. So they are going to be funded at last year's level. United Way was doing the Family Success Network. This was part of the $2 million that I had talked about in terms of prevention contracts that we had done. So those were a limited time contract, and we were planning to end those contracts. We were planning to sunset them. So as we are arriving to this time, it just made sense to sunset that prevention contract as well. So that will be, we spent $200,000 last year as part of that prevention contract. We're going to go ahead and sunset that contract this year. So this is truly a full 100% reduction from last year's spending on that. The Inspire grant, which is a wonderful grant, and we're so thankful for the work that Inspire does. Last year it was funded at $300,000. These are small grants that are given out to community organizations. Basically, the reduction here is slated for 150 instead of 300. So this is a targeted 50% reduction. The YWCA of Greater Cincinnati does a gender-based violence program in schools for us. And they had received $250,000 in funding last year. We're recommending us reducing that to $150,000 this year. And Women Helping Women also does a similar program. They were funded at $400,000 last year, and we're recommending that we reduce them down to the equal amount of $150,000 as well. On the youth employment program side, last year we spent $9.8 million through 3 different funding sources: the levy funds, TANF, WIOA funds. 4.9 of those funds were levy funds, and so we're proposing removing all levy funds from that program this year. So it will still be funded at close to $4.9 million. So even though it's a 50% reduction, we're still going to be close to $5 million in investment in that program, just on Talbot House. And then in Harbor House, we're going to, they're majority levy funded, so they are receiving $2.7 million, and of the $2.7 million, 2.5 of that was levy funded. So in their case, that percentage is a little bit higher. It's 93%. So we'll still keep $200,000 in TANF funds going with them as well. So in terms of what that means for youth served through the youth employment program, so the levy funds were basically serving 2,234 kids, which is less than 50% of the kids. So we'll still be able to serve little over 2,400 children as part of our funding model still through the TANF, WIOA, and Summer Youth TANF funds here going forward as well. So this is the big summary. I'll go through it real quick. So legal aid received 1.6 million last year. They will keep their 1.6 million this year as well. So 0% reduction in levy funds for them, just no increase. United Way was 200K, and we're reducing it fully, so a full 100% reduction. Just I want to note on the last column there, I've also noted any other funding that the organization may receive from JFS. And in those two organizations' case, they don't receive any other funds. Inspire, 300,000, reduced by 150, retain 150 through the levy funds. YWCA received 250,000. We're reducing it by 100,000. They'll still receive 150,000, which is a reduction of 40% in levy funds, but they will still keep two contracts that they receive funding from the levy, which is the local domestic violence program and the special visitation program. The local domestic violence is 140 budgeted at 145,000, and the special visitation is budgeted at 290,000. Women Helping Women, we have 400,000. We'll be reducing that by 250,000. 150,000 in retained funding, 62% reduction. They do receive divert funds from the levy right now, but thanks to Assistant County Administrator Webb, we've been able to find some room in in another levy to be able to cover that. I'll just get to that in a moment. So we've been able to divert some options there. Talbot House, so they were receiving $4.9 million from the levy. We're going to reduce that fully, the full 4.9, so there will be 100% reduction of levy funds, but they will still continue to receive TANF and summer youth employment, leading up to about 4.9 million, almost $5 million in funding. Harbor Youth is receiving $2.5 million from the levy. They'll be reduced by 2.5, which will be a full reduction, but they will receive $200,000 for summer youth programming that was available through the TANF Summer Youth Program. In terms of fiscal impacts, I want to talk about a reduction that we have made in our budgeting for Child Support Enforcement Administration on our side. So this is one of the divisions within JFS. They were receiving $2.5 million in support from the levy. We've made some significant changes in terms of how we're doing staffing and some terms of programming to be able to reduce some of the costs internally. So we reduced our budget there, our support there that we're receiving from the levy to child support enforcement by 20% there. And then proposed move to, again, I want to say this in the most humble manner possible. I know that things that happen in a JFS levy and JFS budget has impacts throughout the county because of how symbiotic all county budgets are. And we're so thankful for the partnership that we've gotten from Assistant County Administrator Webb and Assistant County Administrator Brugan in just trying to navigate this. But we recognize the amount of pressure that JFS is putting on the other funds here, especially the general fund as well as the other levies. And as we're kind of going through this lines here, we understand that by reducing this in the levy, this is having, especially on the general fund, automatically a $9.6 million impact. So 3.5 of that is going to come from the TANF match assumption. $5 million of that is going to be the juvenile court placement costs that JFS has historically paid for and will be covered by general fund going forward if possible, if if the commissioners give such a direction. General fund assumption for guardian ad litem as well, which is about $1 million. And proposed move to other levies here is the complex medical health program. This is a $2.8 million cost that Assistant County Administrator Webb has recommended that could be moved to indigent care levy, divert to our family services and treatment levy temporarily. That's $425,000 there. And then there's the juvenile court medical cost moved to the indigent care levy. And that happened last year, actually. So in 2025, in order to help us out, Assistant County Administrator Webb already moved that over. So that's already taken place. So we're hoping that we can continue that into 2026 as well. So commissioners, next steps, if the commission so wishes, I think the next steps would be to transfer appropriate expenses to the general fund and to other levies, implement clinical and programmatic changes that I've outlined today to reduce the expenses, engage with community organization to reorient program delivery. So those are our next steps. I know, again, this is a really tough presentation, and happy to answer any questions. I've got subject matter experts to help me out if there's something out of the scope of my understanding as well.
Thank you for your presentation. I'll open it up. Before I do that, I do have one general question. First page, when you were saying the consultant said that if we follow through on all these goals, these 6 goals, and they said that in 2021, we would end up with 24 million.
That is correct, Commissioner.
So where is this consultant now? I'd like to talk to him, because at the point you look at a graph and you're being pre-warned that this is where we're going to end up if we do all these great things, which is what we wanted to do and we have done. This is where we're going to end up.
Yeah.
So what? And you weren't here, John. But the question is, at that point when it was presented, was there any? And well, Jeff was here, I'm sure. Strategy on how do we do these things and not end up with 24 million. Jeff, maybe you can answer the question. I mean, did we just accept the consultant's overview and just keep moving on and being aggressive and doing the things we needed to do? But I would have said, hold it, wait a minute, as soon as I saw this.
So I would just say, in general, most levies work from the perspective of building a balance in the early years and then drawing that balance down in the later years. So that is not that graph is not atypical to a levy in the county. What changed, I think, in this particular dynamic that Mr. Nelson referred to is the dramatic increase in cost in the past 3 years, primarily the cost of kids in care, that drew that balance down much more rapidly and much more precipitously than the consultant had projected. And that's been a dynamic in the state that we've seen over the past couple of years that I don't know, I can't say one way whether it should or could have been predicted back when the consultant did this initial report.
Yeah, Commissioner, if I could add to that, if you could bring up the slides real quick, that would be wonderful. So in this inflection point, the slide that I had, you'll notice that we actually followed a lot of what the consultants said in terms of spending pretty early on in the cycle. So if you look at 2022 ending balance, 2023, we're very close. We see that shift happening towards 24, 25, primarily because I think overall we saw the workforce change significantly. I think this commission addressed that at the county level by giving increases. So a lot of our placement providers were pretty much in the same place where they couldn't take children because they didn't have staffing. So they had to go in and increase staffing as well. And so a lot of those costs got passed on to us. So just to kind of illustrate, and I'm picking round numbers here, and I can give you more specific numbers here after the meeting. But like, for example, when we started in 22, 23, our cost of care was somewhere between 40 and $50 million. By the time we reach 2025, we're spending $90 million, like I said, in cost of care. So we've almost seen, in some cases, a doubling of cost of care.
And we know that COVID had an impact on it for sure. And the other items that you mentioned, the child tax credit and all of that. So we know there was an impact for sure, major impacts. But I guess I'm asking, and not to be redundant, but at the point we were at 83, was there a strategy? And I don't need you to answer. Okay, we're continuing to go down. What do we need to do next? So those were interventions that happened, or the COVID and all of this stuff that I mentioned earlier that impacted it. But I hear Commissioner Reese, Vice President Reese, in my ear, because she says it was $100 million, and now what happened? Did I sound like that? Higher. Okay. Yeah. But I just had to ask the question initially, and then we can do all things. Great, but if we don't have the money to do them, and so maybe I'll just end with this, and then move over to Vice President Reese. Is that we also, as we look at cuts in JFS, we have to be creative and look outside of ourselves and look in the community. Who else helps with women's violence? Who else helps with homelessness? And there are lots of resources out there and agencies that we're going to have to depend on because we can't provide all the things that we were accustomed to providing. So, Vice President Reese.
Thank you, and just continuing with that, and this is not to you, Director, because you weren't here, but we keep saying COVID, and one of the things during COVID is we had a lot of ARPA money too, so it wasn't like we were flooding with money because we had $158 million, and then we combined two levies. That's when I first got here. They said we combined two levies. And it was reported, this was during COVID, because I came in during COVID. It was $100 million, just like she just said. And I kept asking, well, they got a song out, there's a whole lot of money, $100 million. And I kept asking every time we would have a presentation. And about maybe, now it's 26, it'll be 2 years ago, but it was a year ago then, and we still had $100 million in the bank. And it just seems like that's a lot to spend going into, I guess, 25. We ran through $100 million. And what a taxpayer watching would say, oh, you went broke just in time to go back to the ballot box to them. And I had been saying that. I'd been saying it before we ran through those dollars. And I would agree with President Dumas when we have to look at these consultants. And we got to have an audit, because if I'm out there, I'm saying that's a lot of money that we ran through. And I understand, we got to really get down to the nitty gritty of it, because, COVID was bad, but we had a lot of money, a whole lot of money. And I think at that time we were trying to do, the consultant recommended and the TLRC recommended preventative programs. And those programs, I think, as a board, one of the things we kept saying was that we want to make sure whatever we do is sustainable.
Yes.
President Dumas was always saying that, hey, we got to make sure we can. And I thought we looked at most of the stuff that we had presented as sustainable. And it's just so hard to say, you had $100 million yesterday and you broke today. And I can't blame it on COVID, because COVID, we had more money. Now we don't have any money. The guy in the White House, he ain't sending nothing down here at all. But we had a lot of money then. and we combined two levies. We were told to combine them by the consultants. You combine these two, you got all this money and you're able to do things. So to the people that's watching out there and myself, I'm sitting up here saying, well, wait a minute, yesterday we had $100 million. Now today, just in time to go to the ballot box, we broke again. And it makes people feel a little suspicious. Now that's not on you. You came in later on, but I wanted to put that on the table. With that being said, there are some cuts. I know we got to make some cuts. On the youth program, when you're dealing with the federal money or what have you, is it only for poor families?
Yes, ma'am. They have to meet the TANF requirements for the families. So it wouldn't be, so they would have to qualify for that program. So with the levy funds, we don't have qualifiers. So any youth could apply for that program and qualify for that program. But with the TANF, there is a qualification aspect to that. So it would be families in need.
Yeah. So that's what I got a problem with. The people that's getting hurt the most right now is working families. They can't qualify for nothing. They got $2 too much to get any help, and they've got thousands of dollars too less to be rich. And so, we have got a lot going on. People say, we want to deal with youth. And I like the fact that youth, because no matter what your income, you could get with the wrong crowd. If you're 14 or 15 years old, you're not having to go to school, you're sitting around all day, nothing to do. Camps are too expensive, and the camps they have now only want to go from 8 a.m. to 12 noon and charge you $500 and $400. People can't afford it. So now they're sitting around idle, and then they come back to us and say, what are y'all doing? That's how we ended up like this, because people were saying, what are you doing with the youth? And we saw that people said youth didn't want to work. We had our kickoff in Evanston. Not one fight, not one person got shot. Kids beat us there. They were lined up with their suits on, their resumes, and were ready to work. And we were able to help parents who said, I can't afford to get, and when I say I can't afford, you don't have to be like destitute, one step above homelessness. People said, I just can't afford to get get them to have the physicals, and so we had the physicals. So the Office of Youth was really designed so we can get our arms around everything we're doing, whether it's Inspire, different things. What's the numbers of youth we're helping? But I think it would be a mistake to go back to the old model. We had that model. We had that model before where you had to be one step above homeless to get a summer job. And that created a problem. We just had a problem down at the Metro thing downtown, and I understand the Jobs and Family Services former director went to me and they tried to blame, says all y'all kids that you got under custody, they ain't got no jobs, they tried to blame us, our kids. So I'm just saying, all this, whether you do this and then they end up juvenile goes up, I mean, we're paying for it somewhere, and I don't have the answer to it, but I just don't believe if you're a resident, a citizen of Hamilton County, your children should have an opportunity to also get a job. And these jobs are not just jobs, this is mentorship. The other thing I thought, if you're cutting jobs, right, you said you're gonna have less jobs this time because you don't have, I saw where we advertising the city of Cincinnati job fair. If we ain't got no jobs, then why are we giving out all the jobs? With just, we got 49 municipalities. So we have a job thing, but it doesn't matter if you Lincoln Heights or Anderson Township, Coleraine Township, you can get a job, or Bond Hill. So why are we running all of you say you ain't got that many jobs, and then I sent it to Mr. Ludo. We're advertising only one municipality's job fair, and we don't have any jobs. So, we're cutting our jobs. So I just want to make sure that the messaging is there. And I have told Mr. Ludo I'm not in favor of cutting the jobs. I think some of the cuts, like YWCA, divert their kind of, they may have to take, everybody has to take a cut, but maybe we can make it smaller. so we can phase it in versus just going in cutting people right away. Because that's the reason we got it. There's a need, and we don't want we hit it on the backside when we can have prevention on the front side. That's kind of where I'm coming from. I know it's a hard thing
It is.
to do. Talbot House and Harbor Youth. Talbert's been around and been doing a lot of youth employment. I'm not saying Harbor's not. I know they're out of Toledo, but I just want to see if we can do better with that. There are some big cuts about emancipation. What I would say to that is we got to have maybe a new program getting a kid ready to be 18. And I understand what you're saying, and we have to make a determination. When we had extra money, we could go longer. But it's just like a parent right now. A kid graduating from high school, if the parent can't keep them in the house, they got to get out. They got to go to college. They got to get to the military, or they got to get a job. I've got that happening, I know my sister and brother-in-law say, you're not going to lay around here. And they're working on, him now. You get ready to graduate, you ain't going to lay around this house. You're going to get out here, and you're going to get a job, and you're going to get an apartment, and you're going to have to stand up. But they're training, like you said, we've got to figure out how to train then versus keeping going if we can't afford it. So those are some of my things. All of these are great programs. We don't want any of them cut. I understand that. But those are the ones that I wanted to kind of point out with Women Helping Women and YWC and Divert, if there's something we can do. The other thing I was going to say is that we've got to, and you may be doing it already, I don't know, Mr. Ludo, all of these foundations that are out there, we've got to figure out a way to have some of them, step up. Some of them have a lot of money. We also want to put out there's people who, unfortunately, they pass away, and they give money. They leave land at the parks. They have land that they would leave. They have, somebody said they die and they're going to leave everything to the cat or something like that. Do we have anything available that if there's somebody that wants to, because, we're very philanthropic city and county, maybe somehow that's out there that they can, I don't know how you do it, but you hit a button and we're part of that. I don't know, Mr. Ludo, how they do that, but maybe they want to help some youth is my thing. And then the last thing I asked Mr. Ludo to do, the governor, he cares a lot about children. He really does. And that's kind of his big thing. Is there a loan? Can we ask him, can we get a loan? One of those, 100-year loans that you got to pay back later. Is that a possibility? I've asked about, we're selling the building and moving out to Mercy, although he said we're using that money, but what are we selling that can be used? Is there any bonding that could be? We got to just kind of think differently than we've been thinking. I know everybody's putting their heads together, but I asked Mr. Ludo to look at those kind of things. Because I know this is just a Band-Aid, and we need a Band-Aid right away. And we have voted for money to get through the Band-Aid, but I think there needs to be some adjustments with what has been proposed. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dreehouse.
Thank you. I just want to get some clarity about the broader conversation about what we're talking about here. So the graph that you've given us is the reserve, and where we started in 2022 and where we are now with the reserve. What is missing, and I'm not being critical, but rather hoping that it'll come forward in the future, is the overall budget for JFS, to put this in context. Because, as we've been talking for the last couple of months, seriously, every day about the cost of care and what's happening with the Children's Services Levy related to the services that we provide in Hamilton County. We've talked about the cost of care exponentially going up, and that's not unique to Hamilton County. I know it's a statewide and really a federal issue, but the impacts, or the local impacts, is what we're talking about. And so that is contributing to this decline in the reserve because it's a drain on the budget. We've done as much as we can by way of making sure that our caseworkers have case loads that are reasonable and safe for the kids in this community. That is another huge driver here by way of the reduction. So I don't want to, at first I was like, well, wait a minute, the reduction in this reserve isn't simply what is in front of us. It's not just the prevention programs. It is a product of the cost related to the budget and what we do by way of mandated services, some not mandated services, but the drivers of this reduction are primarily cost of care, what we have to do by way of these contracts to keep kids safe in this community, wages, and some of it is the prevention contracts that we've just talked about. So I just want to level set, because at first I was like, well, wait a minute, we're kind of missing the forest through the trees here. And so as you think then about some of the programs that you've talked about to help reduce the gap, I can understand the rationale about, I am the biggest proponent of kinship. That was a program that we started when I first got here. I'm really proud of that work, but I understand that we don't necessarily need the overlap. And I think that makes some sense. When you talk about a hiring freeze, now we've made a lot of progress in JFS related to children's services. It breaks me to know that we're doing a hiring freeze because I've seen the numbers and we're not quite where we need to be by way of caseworkers, caseloads. And that creates turnover if you don't keep an eye on that. So, but I understand that maybe a hiring slowdown makes some sense. Okay. So when you look at some of these, it's like, all right. But then, when you look at some of these other ones, and I have a special affinity for some of them because they were recommendations from the Commission on Women and Girls, where a lot of research was done to try to figure out how we have the biggest impact in the community related to domestic violence and mental health for kids. And so some of these programs are a reflection of that. The commissioners obviously all voted for these in that context, but some of these prevention programs that are offered by Women Helping Women in the YW are really important to create a healthy environment for kids in the community. So I understand that everything's on the table. I too, wonder if we could take a closer look at those in particular, but understand that at least they're not being eliminated. None of the stuff's being eliminated, but rather reduced, given what the kind of the constraints that we're in right now, which leads me to a question related to the cuts themselves and the timing of all of this. So help me understand, when we look at this chart of all the cuts that have been proposed by JFS to the administration and then responded to the budget, is the timing now?
So Commissioner, I'll have Laura come up and kind of give some context to it. So the contracts run different cycles. So like, for example, the youth employment program will be fully funded into April. So I think, or is it March, Laura, you want to talk about?
Yeah, so like our placement contracts, all of them, you see them coming through. Right now, we're getting ready for all of our foster care and group home contracts to come through. That will be, it's about half of our placement programs. And we have negotiated $0 increases for all of those providers. Our challenge, though, and I know we've talked with Jeff and others, is that is our network providers, kind of like healthcare. Then we have our off-network providers, where our network providers aren't able to meet the needs of kids. And so that's where some of those cost drivers are as well. So furthermore, what questions do you have about the timing?
Well, so I guess my question might be for Jeff, actually, now I'm thinking about it. So the reductions that you've proposed, they're built into the budget, into the general fund?
They wouldn't be in,
A number, is a number built into the general fund?
well, not into the general fund, but it would be into the children's services levy fund. So,
In the JFS budget.
So,
yeah.
And many of these contracts that we're proposing, they're knocking on my door asking questions about what is our 2026 budget? Can we get these purchase orders created and can we start those contracts? Because they're happening, the renewals are happening right now, the majority of these.
Okay, so my question is, don't know who's the best answer. We just passed a budget, and we've talked about how if things can't be funded through the levy, they have to be absorbed somewhere, if we so choose, right? Especially if they're not mandated. So my question is, how does this interface with the general fund budget, for one? And then the cuts that have been proposed, I'm trying to get a handle on, because we're also going to be talking about the levy and how we move forward with the levy. And so if we were to make these adjustments, make these cuts to the JFS budget, where does that get us in terms of this line of the reserve going down like it is? And at what point, and we just talked about these cycles, right? It's a 5-year cycle for the levy. At what point do we need to say to ourselves, we cannot continue to fund at these levels, and just the basic stuff, right? The wages and the cost of care stuff. I want to fold all these things into this conversation related to the levy, because this community needs to decide, as they always do, whether or not they're supporting a levy at whatever level the commission puts on the ballot, because this one's going on the ballot this year. So I'm trying to get my arms around and helping the community really understand what it exactly is we're talking about, because what you've proposed here has been already built in. Am I right?
So, Commissioner, I think when we did when we passed the budget, we basically said, hey, we're going to balance the budget, but we know that we're going to have to manage these cuts here in the future. So that's where we approach it. Now, the other thing about the Children's Services Levy is it's so volatile. When Director Patton came here and talked about what that number would need to be, I think the number that he said was, hey, we're headed towards like a $35 million reduction, which is what this is going to add up to, roughly about $35 million reduction from pressures on the levy. So on the graph that I provided on my third slide, I think, on my fourth slide, it shows that we're going to finish the year negative $16 million if we continue the current trajectory. So just doing some mental math here, if that reduction that we're making is $35 million, then we'll be starting our next year, our 2027, with about a 16 million balance. And that is contingent that the cost of care doesn't go up, right? Where we've launched all these parachutes to slow things down. We did that starting in 2024. I think Commissioner Dumas asked this question about if you knew that the balance was going down, what did you do? And there was a number of things that we started doing in terms of how we negotiated things, how we, what percentage increases we started giving. All of that really began. And then on the policy side, we started having these conversations at the state level as well, which to states' credit right now, PCSA and DCY are talking about potentially doing rate cards for placement costs across the entire state. So there's some things that are going on there, but we may not see the impacts of that long term. But just doing quick math over here, just big numbers. So we are at the current trajectory, the way we finished out last year, we're looking at a $16 million negative balance if we do nothing at the end of 2026. So with a lot of these reductions that I've recommended here through this presentation, if we're able to successfully implement that, then basically we will end the year in positive. That is contingent that cost of care doesn't skyrocket. We don't have another crisis of a lot of kids coming in with really high medical and mental health needs. We could potentially start 2027 with a cash balance of $16 million, which would be significantly lower than what we need for the first quarter's operation, because we don't get the revenue from the levy until the second quarter. So we'll need cash to float us to the first quarter, and 16 million will not be enough to do that. But we'll have to kind of get by. So any different ways we're looking at this is not a pretty picture, but that $35 million in cuts will at least get us end the year in a positive and potentially give us bare minimum we need to float us through the first quarter of next year.
You're trying to keep us from going into the red. That's what you're trying to do.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
And we got a little bit of a buffer then built in here if we make all these cuts. And it's tiny.
It is very tiny.
It's tiny. Okay, that's helpful. I just want to put this in context because it is to just see the reduction in the reserve for me doesn't tell the whole story. Right, because it's more than just the reduction in the reserve. It's what the budget is in and of itself, and the needs. And as you say, prices aren't going down, so that 16 million will get us. I don't know what it gets us. It doesn't get us much. So then knowing that this levy is on this year, I think that's because we're going to have a difficult decision to make related to the levy, and we need to have a clear understanding of what the situation is and what's driving the cost, as the other commissioners have said. So that's what I was trying to get to, and just try to get some clarity as far as the timing of these cuts, where they go in, and where that puts us. And I understand what you're saying. It keeps us out of the red.
Absolutely.
For a while.
Commissioner, if I could, you'd also ask the question about the relationship with the general fund. So there is, as Mr. Nelson has indicated, there's a recommendation here for the general fund to absorb this year several categories of expenses. So that is one area where we likely will need some legislation from the board, where we will need, because right now those costs are in fact budgeted in the Children's Services Levy. So we will need to do some sort of budget adjustment to move those costs into the general fund. So that would, once this conversation concludes, once the board has affected any tweaks or modifications to the proposal that Mr. Nelson has in front of you, we would then come back with that resolution as well. I think you were making this point.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? So to be clear, then the proposed impacts, I thought it was like 9 million.
It's about 9 million.
About 9 million to the
On the
general
general
fund.
fund,
All right.
yes,
So which budget are we talking about? Does it impact this year's budget? Was it built into this year's budget that we just passed?
It was not built into the general fund budget.
That's what I'm saying. So we've got a 9 million gap now. If this goes forward, we have a 9 million gap in the general fund budget that wasn't built in when we passed the budget just a month ago.
Yeah, and what I think we had indicated on that previously was just that would be something that we would earmark against the reserve. There, as this board knows quite painfully well from where we ended 2025, there was not 9 million in capacity in the operating budget to pick a number of that sort up. So this would be something we would have to budget against the reserve, earmark it, look at, as we talked about at the end of the year, as we close the books on 2025 firmly, as we reconcile where we ended the year on the reserve, how interest earnings came in the last quarter, those types of things, which we talked about in the last meeting of 2025, we could then see if some of those dollars could be placed against that. I will say on those three items, some of those items are, I think, pretty known pretty scientifically. The TANF match, I think, is computed fairly accurately on a formula basis. I think the guardian ad litem costs are known pretty reasonably. We're not typically certain on a year-to-year basis what the juvenile court placement costs are going to be. So the number says 9.6 million. It may fluctuate a little bit. We'll just need to be working primarily with the public defender on the GAL costs and with juvenile court on the placement costs as well. I did just want to say in addition, I'm sorry, Commissioner, did you?
Well, just quickly, because I have to go to a 1 o'clock.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So I just wanted to double down on something that was said earlier, just for emphasis, that everything the board has said here today is correct. And as we've drawn down this balance over the past couple of years, I believe the intent from the TLRC, the intent from the board when this was originally done, was to draw these dollars down primarily through the stabilizing of staff and by implementing programming that would be transformative for the community. And we did that through things like youth employment programming, through kinship programming, through preventative grants that work upstream to keep kids out of care and out of situations of abuse and neglect. As that was happening, what no one had predicted was that we were going to see skyrocketing costs and care throughout the state as we have. Just the numbers that I looked at myself, looking at the past TLRC report to the actual numbers that we have now, we spent over the past 2 years about $40 million, past 2 or 3 years, about $40 million more in cost of care than was budgeted through those initial projections. So you layer that back into this graph, and you see that absent that, this was working pretty much to plan. What we could not plan for was that increase of cost of care, and that's something we can go into more next week if we need to.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the clarity on all fronts, on all budget fronts. Just one last thing, I too am very concerned about the kids aging out. We know that's a challenge population. We know if they don't have supports wrapped around them, that they really have difficulty. They sometimes become homeless. And then it's a burden to all the other systems. So I too was wondering if there's something to be done before that, like at the 16, 17 age range, that we could do while we still have them in care, to preclude them from kind of dropping off the cliff when they turn 18. So I know that we've got programs in place for that, but I too am really concerned about that, because it's a huge, $8 million is a huge line there. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple comments that I had, and we talk about possibly taking money out of our reserve. Our reserve is already down for our general budget. It was, I believe, 18%, maybe down to 15% reserve for our general budget. Wanted to comment about Commissioner Reese had brought up about foundations, and that's exactly where I'm going. The State Capitol Task Force is meeting at 1 o'clock, and as I reviewed the applications of people asking for money through the state, there were a lot of foundations that are contributing to monies to their applications. So what I'm saying is there are a lot of foundations that don't know that we're in need, and we have to expose the community to our needs, because we can't do it alone. We can't take it out of the reserve. We don't know when there's going to be, we have to, if we agree, but there may be another emergency, and then what do we do? So we need to come up with a strategy on how we let the community in this whole region know what our needs are. I know one particular president, CEO, who just loves boys and girls clubs. And if he knew, and that's not on here, if he knew that there was a deficit, I'm sure that he would give lots of money for it. So it's not just one, lots of foundations and individuals that would give money. And lastly, all these programs are fantastic. And we all can carry a flag for each initiative that we present. And I'm carrying the flag for the Inspire initiative. It's $300,000 to be cut for $150,000 to down to $150,000. That's nothing in the grand scheme of what needs to be cut. Considering the fact that it's impacted over 30,000 young people, and not only young people, the mentors that are working with these young people, we want them to, and they all agree, not about the cuts or whatever, but you agree it's a good program, right? Yeah. And so the mentors, but the mentors, we want to continue to encourage them too. So I don't think that 50% cut on a program that's only 300,000. So I'm not asking you to answer, and we all think that we should not be cut, but we're talking about millions in other programs. So just for my colleagues to think about, and I think that's all I have, because I do have to go. And I will mention this when I go to this task force today. All the movers and shakers of the county are there today, and let them know our needs, So anything else to come before we had some great discussion. So thank you so much for your presentation.
Commissioner.
Okay. At this,
Do want to thank some of the folks in the audience
Yes.
that have a particular interest in this. Thank you for coming. and-
thank
and
you so
listening in.
much,
Yeah.
because it's really, well, I won't go there, but yeah, thank you so much for coming. So, you know, we have to make some hard decisions. You guys have to make some hard decisions. You've had to do it before, and we'll figure it out together. Unity, that's what it's about, okay?
Commissioner,
So-
I know you have to leave, so I'll make this extremely quick.
Okay.
But just in terms of next steps, so
Yeah.
we will get some legislation together for the transfer of some of this to the general fund. We'll also work with JFS based upon the comments that we heard from the board today, just to see if there's any changes that need to happen to the recommendations that were made. Come back with something that just generally references this. So maybe when the board passes the general fund transfer, it could also reference something just giving high level approval to the reductions that need to be made, just so everyone has a roadmap as to where this is going and we're not miscommunicating on it.
Thank you so much for that. At this point, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Commissioner Summer Dumas.
Yes.
Commissioner Reese.
Yes.
Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yes. Thank you all.